Jonathan Steinsapir, you're an attorney representing the Michael Jackson estate. How exactly does the Michael Jackson estate work? How big is it? Who does it benefit?
An estate is literally just a collection of properties and assets. So Michael Jackson's estate is the property that he owned at the time of his death, and then money continues to come in. And the people that ultimately benefit from the estate, the people who will get the money in the end, are Michael's 3 children, along with some charities.
And how much is the estate worth at this point?
I've read public reports, and, take it with a grain of salt, that it's worth about $2 billion.
Have you seen the documentary, Leaving Neverland?
I've seen the movie. It's a very powerful film. But let's be honest that it relies solely on the credibility of these 2 guys. Now, anyone can make a very powerful documentary, but when you scratch below the surface of the credibility of these 2, you're going to see some issues. There was no effort made at all to reach out to anyone who would have a different point of view. I've never heard, and in fact, we've looked and we challenged HBO on this. When have you ever made a documentary with these kinds of allegations without even contacting the subject of the allegations? And you say, well, Michael's dead. Well, that's a cop-out. Michael's dead, so he can't sue for defamation, and if he were alive, he would.
What would you have said had Dan Reed contacted you?
What would we have said is, let's talk about Wade Robson in particular. Look, this rests entirely on his own credibility. Now, Wade, I know they talk about the fact that he testified in 2005, but he withstood an insane cross-examination. He did not waver. So that would be the first point. But then let's walk through the timeline a little bit. Wade, in 2011, comes to John Branca, the executor of the estate, wanting to be the lead choreographer on the Cirque du Soleil 1 show. And he was not hired for that. And it was after that he had his revelation that he had been molested. And now here's where I think the credibility really comes into question. He came into court saying, look, I lied in 2005, and he had his story about why. And he said, this is a line in the film, given that I had been lying before, I want to speak the truth as loudly as I lied before. Well, in the litigation, and in fact in that very declaration, he was caught lying through his teeth. To get around the statute of limitations, he had to say he was unaware of the estate. And he declared under penalty of perjury, I am not aware that there was an estate of Michael Jackson until basically 60 days before he filed his lawsuit. Well, as I just told you, he had met with John Branca in 2011. Unless there be any doubt that he knew, that there was an estate, his talent agent had said, you need to meet with John Branca, the executor of the Michael Jackson estate. The judge said there was no need for a trial because no rational finder of fact could believe that Wade Robson was telling the truth about when he learned about the estate. So what we would have said was cross-examine him, ask him or let us tell our side, which is these are reasons that we should be questioning Wade's story.
So you're saying that Wade Robson lied about his knowledge of the estate in this most recent court case. Why would he lie now? Is there any financial incentive there or something?
There's a mention of the lawsuit being dismissed in the documentary, but there's no discussion about the fact that they're appealing that lawsuit. And it just so happens that this documentary is coming out at the time their appeal is being heard, and their lawsuit isn't for, $1,000 or something. They're asking for hundreds of millions of dollars. But I think the greater issue is if you are any interest in telling a complete story, why would you limit yourself only to these 2 people, given the nature of these allegations?
This is like the really difficult part about this story, about this documentary, about whether or not you believe Wade and James or not. You can imagine them being kids. If this happened, they were super destroyed by it. They were repressing all of these feelings, and maybe it took them a long time to come to terms with them, and now they're finally admitting what happened, even though in the past they've denied it. And when you couple that possibility with the fact that, Michael Jackson settled this case out of court in the 90s and then was indicted in the 2000s, and that there have been many accusations, doesn't that raise some doubt about his character here, about, the case that the estate is presenting?
Well, you say many accusers. That's not really true. Bill Cosby has, 60 accusers. Harvey Weinstein has, I think, like 100. I don't know. With Michael Jackson, during his lifetime, there were two. There was The Boy in 1993. Michael Jackson was in between a rock and a hard place. He had to go to a civil trial before a criminal trial. So he made a decision to settle. I think with the hindsight being 2020, that was probably the worst decision he ever made in his life. The other accuser during his lifetime was the Arvizo child. The jury repudiated it, didn't believe Arvizo. The only other two accusers are Safechuck and Robson. Both have come forward after Michael dies, and they both have credibility problems. So it's not that much smoke. You're talking about 4 kids in the entire time. Michael Jackson was around thousands of children. My point isn't that it's problematic that you're making a documentary about these allegations, but if you want to make it, explore them. Explore them.
So the estate is now suing HBO for potentially $100 million or more. You're representing it in the suit. Why exactly is it suing HBO for so much money?
They had contractual obligations to Michael Jackson. They told the story of his concert in 1992 and said that they would not disparage that concert or that product. And now they're releasing a documentary which specifically alleges that Michael Jackson was molesting children on the same concert tour. So that's a breach of contract. And the flip side of that is, if Michael Jackson were alive, he would sue for defamation. There's just no question he would sue them for defamation for this.
And if Dan had reached out for comment, would the Jackson estate still be suing right now?
I don't know. I can't, that's a hypothetical that I can't answer. I don't know. If we felt that this had explored this fairly and it was not, in our view, a breach of HBO's obligations, because we have not sued Dan. We have no right to sue Dan. We don't have a contractual relationship with them. And, defamation dies with the person. So we have no right to sue Dan. But that said, Michael never answered allegations that Wade Robson was molested by him, because Wade Robson, during Michael's life, was doing everything to praise Michael. I think Dan came in with a story to tell. And, another thing he says is he didn't want to talk to anyone because, they weren't in the room with Michael and Wade. Well, neither was Dan Reed. And the other person in the room is dead. And he never got to respond to these allegations in his life. He just didn't.
If Michael didn't do anything wrong ever, if he's totally innocent of all of these allegations, couldn't he have just made his life easier by not hanging out with so many young boys, even after the first set of allegations in the early 90s?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, Michael was guilty of, in my mind, of being very naive. He was an odd dude. I mean, in a good way. He also slept in a bedroom with a chimpanzee at times.
Do you think it's possible that he could have abused children?
No. I've looked at the evidence of all of this, and when you go through the 4 specific accusers, it's unbelievable. In the realm of, is it possible? Is anything possible? Was the moon landing fake? Sure, anything's possible. But based on the evidence, no.
After the Michael Jackson estate filed its lawsuit against HBO, the network released a statement. It says, "Despite the desperate lengths taken to undermine the film, our plans remain unchanged. HBO will move forward with the airing of Leaving Neverland, the 2-part documentary, on March 3rd and 4th. This will allow everyone the opportunity to assess the film and the claims in it for themselves." I'm Sean Rameswaram. This is Today Explained.